Originally, I was gonna go with the shark costume for Halloween, learn the spirit of October, but I already did that in the last video, so I guess this time I'll go with human gear modules. There, I'm a human gear coast for Halloween, I guess.
Take off towards a dream.
The big three of Tokusatsu have certainly evolved over the years, and while some say that being toyetic have downgraded the quality in terms of those shows, I'll have to highly disagree with that, because there has been one Tokusatsu franchise that has been lurking in the shadows since 2005.
Where there is light, shadows lurk and fear reigns. Yet by the blade of night, mankind was given hope.
This is Garo, a show that's aimed for an older audience, focusing more on storytelling than worrying about if it'll sell brand new toys. Although merch doesn't hurt. Oh, I really want that. As the years go by, Garo continues chugging along with its live-action series, films, anime, spin-offs, alternate universes, up to a point where the stories seem to have ended. With the 15th anniversary coming up, where could we go from there? Let's enter Garo vs. Road. The first time I saw anything vs. Road related was through Twitter. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I was a bit interested, but I didn't think much of it, until my friend Jin said on Twitter that he thought the first episode was worth checking out. Of course, after watching it, I made a video regarding my thoughts on it, link in the description. I said that episode 1 was great, and I'd love to keep up with the show, especially since it's only 12 episodes. I've always been that guy who wishes for shorter seasons because stories can benefit from not being stretched out over 50 episodes. Having that many isn't bad, I just prefer fewer episodes for a tighter grasp on the story, which was already a positive for me getting into Garo. I've said several times that I've seen the original Garo, as well as a few movies, so while I'm not that versed into the series, you don't have to be either because vs. Road is its own thing, and you don't need any prior knowledge to watch. Although, I was a little put off at first because Garo has always been about the mystical, but in vs. Road we're thrust into this virtual world as 100 people are chosen to fight for the title of Garo. Please don't. At the start we follow Quan Senna and his friend Hoshiai, who tells Quan about a mysterious game that only a chosen few are able to play, called Garo vs. Road. So Garo in general has always been pretty good to me in every aspect, characters, action, and story. Vs. Road continues getting high marks from me, simply by how impressive it all is. But the best aspect of all to me are the characters. People being lured into a death game isn't anything new, but the execution here is fantastic. Quan protected Hoshiai from a thug in the real world, because Hoshiai beat him in an arcade game. How meta. And that led to Hoshiai bringing up vs. Road. Then that same thug is also in vs. Road, so they fight in the game, but your powers within it are what you make of it, so Quan gains super strength. Some impressive notes come in with the fight. The screen shakes with every impact, the sound effects are very crunchy, and their choreography is still as good, if not better, than I remember Garo having. Other Garo fights do feel larger than life with magic, wirework, and swords, so in vs. Road, we have raw fights with magic, wirework, and swords. Just kidding. But the fights feel more grounded, even if super strength is involved. Episode 1 introduces us to most of the characters we'll be following in this battle royale, including a hint of something bigger that's happening in vs. Road. The game is already introduced as a bit grim, since round 1 ends with 50 people left. But then we see a group of businessmen really having the time of their lives killing people. It all seems pretty straightforward as the rounds progress and more people drop from the game, but the characters giving their backstories and what we learn about the game is just so good. I remember seeing a couple of comments that went something like, oh, this show is nothing like Garo and it does a huge disservice to the franchise, and to which I have to say, no, it's still a really good show. And besides, Garo has always been pretty out there, even for Tokusatsu standards, so it practically re-raising the bar with this show shouldn't be counted as a negative. If that still isn't enough, then think of it this way. The show takes place in the Garo universe. There are Makai Knights, horrors, and the mystical feel you would normally expect, but this time it's from a different perspective. We're watching through the eyes of an everyday person, and that's something I've always wanted to see in toku shows. It feels like we're still watching Garo since, yeah, this isn't meant for kids. There isn't any nudity or decapitations or anything like that. Of course, the violence can get brutal, but it's more in the theming that I'm getting at. A couple of characters in particular have backstories that can be uncomfortable for some. I know I'm being extremely vague, but that's only because the show is only 12 episodes long. Anything past episode 1 is basically a spoiler, so before I get to that, let me just say, if any of this has intrigued you at all, if even for a little bit, then please watch Garo vs. Road. Following each character as they fight to gain the right to wear the Garo armor is a fantastic journey, and like I keep saying, it's only 12 episodes. The less you know about the show, the better. And again, you don't have to have seen anything Garo to get into this. If you don't care about spoilers and want to hear me ramble on, then I'd still suggest watching the show. I can't stress enough how amazing it is. In fact, I might even say it's one of, if not the best tokusatsu of 2020, since I don't think anything will top it. That's not a controversial opinion, is it? Light spoilers will begin in 3, 2, 1. I called Vs. Road a tokusatsu, and that's not exactly a wrong statement, but what makes the show stand out even more for me is exactly what made it stand out ever since 2005. Garo has just always done things differently from the beginning, whether it's with a different tone or a different way of telling a story. One thing Vs. Road does is not have any transformations, making this probably the closest we've gotten to a J-drama. Toshiki Nui notwithstanding. Okay, I lied. There are 2 transformations. 2 in the whole show, and they happen a minute after each other in the final episode. I won't show all of that on screen because despite talking about spoilers, it's something I want you to experience yourself. Maybe I do a more in-depth summary with the full-on retrospective or history of in about 10 years from now. Oh, you thought these were retrospectives? Well, not exactly, but I guess you'll see later. With Vs. Road stepping away from the norm, I feel like there's a certain change in tone when the characters don't transform. I'm not saying henshin heroes don't focus on story or characters, because I think transformations can emphasize certain drama. The journey to be able to henshin is fantastic when we have amazing characters, some of which don't even care about getting the Garo armor. Just seeing these personalities interact in and out of the VR world is fantastic. Some of the cast have tragic backstories, others are heroic in their own way that they don't want anyone to die in the game. Some just want to leave the game entirely. It seems like there's a lot going on in such a short show, not even counting the world building, but it all works together on a canvas to create a beautiful painting. And a guy gets suplexed. That's everything I've ever wanted. Isn't it weird that I haven't brought up this story in detail? Well, that's because there isn't too much of an overall story to begin with. From beginning to end, it's about this battle royale and who will win the title of Garo. There are some stirrings about why and how this game is happening, but it's still about being granted the Garo armor. That aside, the characters more than make up for any progression outside of numbers getting smaller in the trials. Now, as much as I praise the show, there are some negatives that I have to bring up. Isn't it weird how whenever I bring up a lot of good things about a show, one of the most common negatives I bring up is the pacing? Yeah, there are a couple characters that I feel break up progression a bit too often. I do enjoy the cast, but sometimes their scenes bring everything to a screeching halt. It's not that their stories were bad in the first place, maybe it's that the scenes could have just been moved somewhere else. That's basically my biggest negative, and everything else would be considered a nitpick. On the opposite side of that, there were a few times where the pacing was phenomenal, more than making up for any breaks. I'm saying quote-unquote breaks, but it's more like this. The pacing is kind of slow overall, but it's consistent and goes uphill even from episode 1. Then we get certain scenes that are just intense where a break feels like it's happening. For example, there was a trial early on where players had to escape a maze by finding a key before time runs out, all while being hunted by horrors. The only thing they have with them is a slab they can transform into whatever they think of. It's a great episode too, even if again takes time to get going. The players didn't even realize that a key was needed, so it almost feels like one of those indie horror movies. Okay, I know that sounds weird. Anyone ever see 2015 Circle? Anyway, most of our main players escape, whether it's through fighting or cunningness. Quan is close to escaping until a horror appears. Time is running out. The next shot is of the players in a safe room. Time is up. Quan is out. The time between then just feels so... the scene is just really great. Alright, wanna know how Quan made it? Remember that slab that can transform into anything the player thinks of? Quan imagined getting a key to the gate. Very clever, and something I was hoping other players would do. But it was cool to see Quan thinking fast under pressure. Of course, the cinematography and acting are what makes scenes like these so good. The choreography for the fights are fantastic and always a highlight when certain characters we follow start to face off in a trial. And it can get pretty brutal. Weirdly enough, my favorite episode is actually one that seemingly has nothing to do with anything.
A disaster that happens every 500 years occurred. The terrifying power of darkness overwhelmed the night.
There's some clear English telling a story about a girl with darkness that was sealed away. Then it's revealed that the story we just heard has to do with a red-haired girl that's been appearing in the games. This is the episode that's the closest to classic Garo as we'll get. Priest, disciple training, magic and all. Plus, seeing how it connects to the VR game just blew my mind, and I won't dare to spoil it here. There was a lot to love about the show, and I was basically at the edge of my seat week to week seeing how the characters progress in the game. At the end of every episode, I was basically like, no, this can't end here, I can't wait till next week. It was such a good experience. This is the Vegas I'll get in these kinds of reviews, I promise. But man, I really can't explain how much I love Versus Road. The action, the story, the characters, it has all the little things I like about Tokusatsu. And it's short, so that gets even more bonus points for me. As I've said before, if any of this has interested you at all, then please watch the show. Despite all the hardships we've had in 2020, I still think it's a great year for Tokusatsu. And this show is the main reason why. With such a memorable cast, great story, amazing action, it should be no surprise when I say that Garo vs. Road is fantastic. These have been pinching my ears, they kind of hurt. Take off toward a dream. I forgot to turn these on the whole time. What the?
Video has reached completion. See you next time.